Hi all, in this video we're going to create a script that would allow us to interact with ChatGPT via command line interface. So the idea is that, let's say you're asking ChatGPT to write you a piece of code. So you need to go to the browser and ask it there, and then they copy paste the code back to your text editor, for instance. But say you're living in a terminal like I do. So in this case, it would be really convenient to have ChatGPT just writing the terminal, right? But there are a few challenges arriving here. So first, we need to make sure that the syntax is being highlighted properly. And also, we need to make sure that ChatGPT does indeed remember our conversation, so that the so-called follow-up corrections would be available, just like it works in the web version. Because by default, the API itself does not really know anything about the conversation that has occurred so far. So we need to manually keep a specific data structure, actually keeping the entire conversation. But once this tiny little trick is going to be applied, the terminal version is going to work absolutely the same the web version does. Now, before we start, let me demonstrate how the end result of what we're supposed to be developing in this video is going to look like. So I simply say ChatGPT, and this is the executable Python script available system-wide. So it tells me you, which means like I'm to ask the question here. So I say hello, okay, and let's say I ask him, so write me a code to print hello 10 times in C. And here we go. So you see, like, the syntax has been highlighted, the source code has been sort of separated from the answer. This is good. And just to demonstrate the follow-up correction, that sort of a thing, or just to prove that it does remember the conversation, I say, and now the same in Python, please. So, which proves that indeed, yes, he remembers that we've been talking about a program that writes hello 10 times. And yeah, so he remembers it, and now he provides exactly the same code but in Python. So I just create a new file called chatgpt.py, and just to make sure this file is going to be like executable, I say !bin, and in my case this is Python 3. For you this might be a different path, but I just want to make sure that this file would be using the Python interpreter if I just click on it, or if I just directly call it without explicitly saying the Python run the file, but just the file itself. And now we need to import a bunch of packages. So let's start with import OpenAI. So this is needed in order to interact with OpenAI API. Then import OS and time. Then we need to import a bunch of things for syntax highlighting. So I'm going to be using Pygments and Colorama. So Pygments for the actual syntax highlighting of the code, whatever code is returned by the ChatGPT, and Colorama to highlight this U as one color and ChatGPT as another color. So hopefully that makes sense. So I can say from Pygments import highlight from Pygments.lexus import get Lexa by name. Okay, from Pygments formattis import terminal formatter, because we're working in terminal, right? Then from Pygments the token I want to import. So a bunch of things here. So we need to import a keyword. So this is for the custom syntax highlight, and I will now provide the custom color scheme that I've developed, and that's really easy to change that, to alter that one for your own needs. So just to bear that in mind. So keyword, the name, command, string, error, number, operator, generic, token, and white space. and that's it. And finally, we want to import Colorama. Okay, let's make sure that everything sort of works. So Python 3 ChatGPT.py. Make sure, yeah, I did import everything properly. So you might want to say, so I'm on Linux, so I say sudo. If you're on Windows, you just say pip install, and that's it. But I have multiple Python installs, so I specify the pip3 in particular. You can probably do pip if you're on Windows. So sudo pip3 install Pygments. So I already have this installed. So you see, like, it tells me that the requirement is already satisfied, and also install Colorama, but this is also installed. So yeah. All right, so we can continue now. Now let me simply drop in the color scheme here. So just to avoid spending hours typing this with the hands. So this particular data structure is going to provide the exact colorings. Now we need to init colors for the Colorama. Okay, so I simply say colorama.init. So the difference between Pygments and Colorama, the Pygments actually works on the source code, and Colorama just allows you to customly highlight a string or a part of the string if you want. So that's the item. Now let's do some OpenAI authentification here. So first we need to specify the OpenAI API key. So I can say OpenAI.API key, and I've stored this as the environmental variable. So I can simply say os.get environmental variable, and it's called OpenAI API key. So if you don't have this, well, I'm doing this for security reasons, so I don't want you to see my OpenAI API key. So here you can just drop the string containing the OpenAI API key. That's fairly enough. If you want to do the way I did, you need to say export OpenAI key and then the key itself. Well, if you're in Linux, if you're in Windows, it's probably somehow possible also, but I'm not quite sure how exactly. Okay, now we need a data structure to keep the conversation, and I simply call it messages. This is going to be a list of dictionaries, and by default we need to specify a couple of parameters here. So we give the role, it's going to be system, and also the content is going to be, so here I say you are a helpful assistant. So what this particular thing does here, these two lines give ChatGPT an idea of how to behave. So the system means like how to behave, and the content gives a string representing the behavior. So for instance, if you put here like you are a helpful assistant, it would be answering the style like it does in the web interface. But if, say, here you type something like answer the questions like you don't care, it would be a completely different style, quite a funny one. So whatever the behavior you want the ChatGPT to interact with you, you can specify this as a sentence in the natural language. So just explain ChatGPT how in particular would you like to talk to you. Okay, now let's provide a couple of helper functions here. So first, the one for the syntax highlighting, and define the function called colorize code here. It takes two arguments, the code itself and the language, right? So first I want to specify the Lexa, and I say get Lexa by name and the language, right? And then specify the formatter is equal to terminal formatter. We assume that the background color is equal to dark, right? And the color scheme, so I'm using the custom color scheme that I've just created, and we want to return highlight and code lexer and formatter. Let's make sure it still works. Yeah, it does. Cool. So another function, so you remember that in the web interface, the way how ChatGPT behaves, it just sort of emulates typing, so it doesn't flush the entire response at once and just types it letter by letter or word by word, goes quite quickly. So we want to emulate that sort of a behavior. So I want to say print response letter by letter, right? So def, I call this function emulate typing, and it takes the message as an argument. So for character in message, we simply want to print the character. At the end we do nothing, so by default print ends with a new line, so we do not want that to happen. Also, we need to flush explicitly here because otherwise it might not be working properly. And then I want to say time.sleep and 0.001. So that's the good enough speed. And by the end, we just want to say print, prints the new line, and also to make sure it works, explicitly specify flush equals to true. Yeah, let's see if it still works. It does. Good. Okay, finally we are coming to the main loop, right? So simply while true, and here let's define the try except construct. So why is this needed? So the idea is that the free API key for the ChatGPT, it only allows you to do 3 requests per second. If you do more than 3 requests per second, it would just give you an error. So this try except sort of thing allows you to catch that. So hopefully that makes sense. So here I just want to provide a simple message. I can say print and colorama dot foreground color dot yellow plus the message itself plus colorama dot style dot reset all, in order to avoid messing colors in terminal. So here we can say something like ChatGPT, let's say busy, try in 20 seconds. Okay, great. So the actual logic, so question, this is the question by the user, so simply input and colorama dot foreground color dot, let's make it cyan, right, plus would be you, so you to ask the question, colorama style reset all. Now if it happens that the question is equal to quit, in this case we simply break out of the loop, so type quit to escape from the program. Hopefully that makes sense. Then we want to add user message to the conversation, and here let's say prompt user to type in his question. I can simply say messages.append, and I append a dictionary in the following format here. So I say role, and this is user, and content, and whatever question we've just asked. Now we want to call the OpenAI API, and here I simply say response is equal to OpenAI dot chat completion dot create, and specify the bare minimum set of parameters here. So you can specify more, like the number of tokens, but just to make sure that it behaves exactly the way it does in the web interface, all I need to say is the model equals to GPT 3.5 turbo. And I'm not quite sure that this exact model is actually used in the web interface, but this is the latest one. If you're watching this video in a couple of years after it has been released, you would most likely have a more advanced model, so like GPT 4, 5, 6, whatever. And also we need to provide the messages equals to messages. Now we want to extract text from the API response. So let's say answer is equal to response, and here we have choices, and let's consider the very first one, and from there we want to get the message, and from there we want to get the content. And at this point we also need to make sure that we add ChatGPT response to the conversation, because otherwise it would not remember what he said previously, which is quite important. So say messages dot append, and append the dictionary again. So here role assistant, so this is him, this is assistant, and answer as the content. Okay, now let's make sure it still sort of works. Okay, invalid syntax. Yeah, that's because because of this single quote character. So let's make it like double quotes. Okay, this is because we have a typo in the strike sub block. Okay, we should get prompted now. Okay, still doesn't work. That's for now, just to figure out what's the problem here. I just get rid of the try accept. I'll just add it later. So let's see. Okay. Okay, now we do get prompted, which is good. Okay, so I will add this try accept when I get done debugging this part actually here. Okay, now the main part. So we are about to be printing the ChatGPT answer to console. So print ChatGPT answer. So all the magic is going to be happening exactly here. So let's start by printing Colorama .4 color .yellow, because that's the color for ChatGPT I've chosen, and ChatGPT sort of answers plus Colorama .style .reset all, and at the end we want to have nothing because it's going to be followed by the actual answer. Now I want to parse the answer, so I say parse answer answer.split by three back quotes. So the format of how the source code is given. So let's say let's say just ChatGPT is telling you something. It says, for instance, show, like, show, here is the code. Like, let's say this is the answer. So then we let's say this is Python code. It would say like Python, and then it would say just like print hello, and then just puts this three back quotes, and then like here is how it works. So that's the like typical response, right? So from here up to here, we need to distinguish between the source code and the non-source code. So if the length of the parse answer is greater than 1, in this case I want to emulate typing and the parse answer indexed by 0 and strip and slice it from the beginning to skipping the very last element. And then let's loop over the chunks within the parse answer. So for chunk in parse answer, so if the length of the chunk split by the new line character indexed by 0 is at least 1, in this case we can simply extract the code. This is going to be equal the chunk itself split by the new line character from the first element into the very end. And also we need to join this with the new line to make sure that's the string type. And now the highlight code is going to be equal to colorize code, and we send our code, and the Alexa let's use Python. Well, Python is good enough to literally highlight many other Alexas, because extracting the language itself might not always be that easy to do. Now if code has this sort of 4 spaces, new line and 4 spaces, and for some unknown reason this sort of chunks are occurring from time to time, in this case we just want to say emulate typing and the highlight code dot strip, and otherwise emulate typing. Let's add the new line character from the beginning and then the chunk dot strip. Finally, emulate typing the entire answer dot strip. So the idea is that we might have some text before the code snippet or after it, or even in between code snippets. So just to make sure that all these scenarios has been handled properly, we add this sort of thing here. Okay, now I think it's time to uncomment this try except conditions here. So make sure they do work, and here, and right quit, and Python 3 ChatGPT.py, and let's say hello. Okay, now let's say write me a program that prints hello 10 times in C. Okay, and it does. Cool. And now in Python, yeah, fantastic. So you see, like, the sentence that goes before the source code is being tracked here and printed, and the source file, the source code itself has been highlighted, all good, and then after the source code, the explanation following also here. The source code is going to be available down below the video in the description, so you can download it from GitHub and give it a try. This is it from my side. Thanks for watching and see you later.